I never heard of television, never knew anything about it in the years that I was at Yale, which was 45 to 47. I went to Columbia, South Carolina in 47, and in 49, went to New York to get into television. But during those years, I never saw a television set. I never saw a television show. I was never inside a television studio. They didn't have television in either Nashville or Columbia or New Haven at that point. So when I went to New York, because of Fred Coe, I was hired at NBC as a stage manager, and I had never seen a television show. They were hiring theater-trained people because they saw that drama was going to be important to them. When I finished my second year at Columbia, I'd had a very good time there. I really enjoyed it thoroughly. We had done some good shows, but I really thought, if I stay longer, this is what my life is going to be. And do I want to stay at this level? Because the salary was really very poor. We were draining out the rest of our accumulated funds to sustain ourselves, the funds that we had gotten from the Banner and from my war service.
Do you recall that salary?
$250 a month for 9 months. That's not a whole lot. Prices of everything was much lower then, too, as you know. Anyway, I called Fred in New York, who was by then the premier producer-director in live television. And I said, "What's happening there?" He said, "Come on up, I think I can get you a job." So while my last production, which was Life with Father, was playing, I got on the train, went to New York, interviewed Bob Sarnoff, the general's son, who was then in personnel work, and Bob gave me a job. Fred was the person who made it all happen. And Fred had his eye on me from the beginning as a potential director. I had not mentioned that when he was at Yale, he came back to Nashville in the summer times. This was the summers of 39 and 40. Both summers he directed, with my encouragement and some small amount of help, Shakespeare productions. He did a Julius Caesar in modern dress, and the second year he did Twelfth Night. I was kind of an informal assistant to him. I played Cinna the Poet in Caesar. I played Festy the Clown in Twelfth Night. And so it renewed our association with each other. But Fred knew he had recommended me to Yale. He had recommended me to Columbia, South Carolina. He recommended me to NBC. And I just kind of followed his path up the way. Can't remember the man's name who was in charge of floor managers, the training and assigning of studio floor managers. The first couple of weeks, I just stood in control rooms and on the floor of sets and watched what was going on and listened and tried to learn as much as I could gain. Watching directors at work, blocking shots, calling shows. Finally was given a job as an assistant floor manager, and then began to work as a regular floor manager, calling controlling the studio for the director. I joined the network in June of 49. By August of 49, this was about 2 months after I joined it, the NBC staff was fairly well riddled with vacations. Most of the shows were sustaining, they were not commercial, and I was given opportunity to start to direct. First was a half-hour show called Theater of the Mind, which was a 15-minute dramatization of a psychological problem with a 15-minute discussion about that problem from a panel of experts who included Faye Emerson, one of the expert panels on psychology. I did 2 of those shows.
Was this daytime?
No, it was evening, but no sponsor. But it was just the network was not a full network at that point. I think we had half a dozen affiliates, didn't even reach across the country. So not a whole lot of people were watching a lot of television to see me make a fool of myself as a television director. The very first show that I did, the Theater of the Mind, Fred, who was the sort of supervising producer, had hired Martin Gable, a very good director, very good narrator, very good actor, to stage the 15-minute play, and then I was to do the camera work, put it on camera, and call the shots on the air. Well, I was really totally fresh, totally new, not knowing what the hell I was doing. And when I made a few suggestions to Martin in the rehearsal process, he didn't take them, and he went ahead his own way. Well, when Fred came into the rehearsal, I guess it was a Thursday afternoon, to see the show, it was a total shambles. Because Martin didn't know anything about television, and he was staging it for the theater, and I didn't know anything about what he was doing and couldn't make my point known. Well, Fred went through the ceiling. First time I'd ever seen one of his famous explosions. He was furious, because obviously he had intended me to be in charge. And after a few minutes of screaming and yelling, Martin Gable walked out. And in a few minutes, the whole cast walked out in protest with how the director had been treated. So there I was that night, left with no cast, no show, and I figured probably no job. I think I was mentally on my way back to Nashville. Who knows? Anyway, Fred persuaded them to come back in and do the show, and he sort of sat behind me and sort of guided me through staging the scenes and putting them on camera. And I got through. Did a second one. Then I was floor manager for things like Tex Antoine, the Weatherman, Kids AC, which was Kids Athletic Club. I don't know what that show was about. The Lady Next Door, which was a kids show in late afternoon. Magic Chef, which was a cooking show. And then Mary Kay and Johnny, which was kind of the first sitcom, a half-hour show with Mary Kay and Johnny Stearns playing the leads. Jack Guilford was their principal supporting man. And after I called after I managed the floor for a couple of shows, then I had a chance to direct one of their shows, did two of them. Then became Kingman Moore's assistant on Lights Out, which was a new half-hour suspense drama taken from the old radio show of Arch Obler. The television version was much more of just kind of normal suspense rather than the horrific sound effects that Arch Obler had in his radio show. But I became Kingman's assistant, and then after a couple of shows, we were still unsponsored, got a chance to direct a Lights Out while Kingman was my assistant. The show opened with a piece of film, 16 millimeter film of a candle burning in blackness, and as the sepulchral voice of the announcer intoned, "Lights out, everybody," the candle flickered down and went out. Well, when I rolled the tape, or the film, we didn't have tape then, rolled the film about 7 seconds before it was to be put on the air, called film, nothing happened. There was no film. And I think I was kind of paralyzed for a moment, and finally called announce, and Frank Knight, I believe it was, said his words, and the show went on the air. And I got through it all right, to find out afterward that just as the show was going on the air, the film projector blew, and they had no backup, so we were out of film. Never had that happen before or after.